Okay, so welcome to this new episode of Serial, where I will go and review through my photos from last month, either that I took or that I developed or that I decided to edit or scan. And we started with those two pictures, the two first pictures. On the left, that's using my Leica SL in Belgrade. And I'm continuing a test for the TTArtisans 50mm tilt lens. And it's out of focus, but I thought this photo is interesting for two reasons. One, that gives you a good idea of the bokeh and the rendering when out of focus of the planes, out of focus planes, which I really like on this lens. But also, I'm using this picture for another project that you might have heard about on the podcast. The podcast project, I call it Matter, where it's the first picture of the project. But anyways, that's again on the SL2 camera. And on the right, that's a picture taken with another of those cheaper lens, I will say, the TTArtisans 35mm f5.6. I've also used it previously, mainly in Iceland, and I'm continuing the test, and that was a good occasion. A really interesting lens, too. We can see it on these two next pictures. It's a very compact lens. It's both the tilt 50mm and from TTArtisans and this one from TTArtisans are quite cheap. You can buy them easily. They're manual focus, but this 35mm f5.6 is super compact, and it's great if you want to just have your camera run around and take pictures. And actually, I was discovering it was my first time in Serbia, in Belgrade. Lots of places for urbex if you're interested. On the left, that's a boat on the Sala River. It's a big river that crosses the city and joins the Danube later. And on the right, that's some kind of factory or complex underneath a bridge. Very interesting environment where I was just passing by, so I took a few pictures, like those two next pictures. The picture on the left, that's underneath the bridge, which is on the right. So super interesting place. I'm sure it could be a really great environment for shoots. But yeah, I was there, used again here it's the TTArtisans 35mm f5.6. Very interesting rendering, very compact lens. Not much character, but works. It's quite a great lens, even so it's not very shallow and not very open in terms of aperture. Here again, two pictures taken with the same equipment. So Belgrade is a really green city. Lots of green spaces, trees, lots of parks, and yeah, really a nice discovery. The people are super nice. And here again, two pictures in Belgrade, but using the TTArtisans 50mm f1.4. For this trip, I haven't used the tilt function. I just wanted to see if this lens could also serve as a 50mm, normal 50mm. Even so, it's a little big because of the tilt mechanism, but yeah, really nice rendering with this kind of circly, rotary bokeh on the periphery, but a really nice, soft, while still precise rendering. I think that's a lens I really enjoyed using. I will do a specific video about it. Here again, two pictures where we can see this really, because of the 1.4 aperture, you can really separate the different planes of your picture, like on the left. Belgrade has lots of socialist architecture, lots of brutalist buildings, but also older structures. So it's a really nice place to go around. Here also, you can see there's some really modern constructions. In terms of architecture, it's quite disparate, but very interesting. Lots of newer buildings coming up, but still great constructions dating back from a long time. So really nice ambiance. Here on those two pictures, the one on the left, that's we're entering my Hyprt8 project. I decided to use this 50mm tilt 1.4, see if it was not only useful in urban situations. Here on the left, that's the picture, the first picture we saw that was out of focus, that's the same place a little later. So the sun's down the horizon, but that's in focus. And on the right, that's me using this TTArtisan for the Hyprt8 project in studio settings with my weird lighting concoctions. I don't know how I would name that. Really interesting rendering from this lens. Here again, two different ways of using my lights and using this lens. Light experiments which kind of worked with this lens. I was quite surprised. I usually use different lenses for this project, but here the really great bokeh. You can actually, using the tilt, you can slightly increase the effect. Very interesting tool. And also for black and white works. This rendering, soft rendering, old school rendering is really great. So I will definitely do a separate video about this TTArtisan 50mm lens. Here on the left, that's again that same setup, the SL2 and the TTArtisan 50 tilt, that you can use for really interesting works, in my opinion. And you see this sort of circular bokeh on the periphery. And on the right, we're going to something completely different. That's film. That's using another camera too. So the film is Kodak Vision 3 Cine film. It's the version with the color balance, which is made for tungsten. So it's kind of offset color-wise, but and that's using a camera I'm not very used to use, the Contax T, the original one, a small rangefinder, and really interesting to try this out. Here again, two pictures taken with the same equipment, Contax T and the expired Kodak Vision 3 in Iceland. And yeah, I really like the precision of the camera. And for those who know, most of you know probably, but I use different kind of cameras, lenses, films, sensors for my various projects, and that combines both my artistic creative process, but also lets me test new gear, or I mean old gear, but gears that I don't know, and do separate videos about it. That might help you find the right equipment too. Here again, that's the same equipment. I think the optical construction of the Contax T is really interesting. I knew it from reputation, but it obviously is a really nice tool to use and very specific character, even more with the Vision 3. Here are two pictures where we're moving to something else. In terms of film, it's also cine film, but it's from Fuji. It's Reala 500D, and I'm using a Leica CL rangefinder camera. It was supposed to be the cheaper version of the rangefinders in the 70s and 80s from Leica, which was a joint project with Minolta. And here it's with the 40mm f2.0 lens. The picture on the left, that's the first picture of the roll. So you have this sort of lower part which has been exposed to sunlight. But then you have this sort of dark picture somewhere in Geneva near the Rhone River. Then on the right, that's London. I like going around with those new cameras in places which I don't know. I get both the excitation of the new material, new equipment, and the place I'm visiting. So here's the two pictures, again, London. A really great camera, even so the film is kind of expired. A great camera to get the sense of London, in my opinion. Even so the picture on the right is kind of blurry. Here are two pictures of the city. Really nice combination with the camera, and lots of pleasure using it, and I liked the result. So very interesting result from this film. Here we're going back to digital, but some kind of twist. For those who know, I've been curious about the Foveon sensors. It's a technology where the sensor captures the color, the pixel, the red, green, and blue pixel basically are one on top of each other, which means you don't need to do the mathematical, computational color recreation of the three pixels you usually have next to each other. The red, green, and blue are usually next to each other, and you have to do a Bayerian transformation to to get the real color of the pixel, and that creates some micro contrast modifications, supposedly. And here it's my first test of the Sigma DP2 Merrill camera, which is supposed to be kind of the Graal up to now of those Foveon sensors. It's not a full frame, it's a digicam, and definitely the colors come out really differently. There's a really nice micro contrast, and I'm kind of impressed by the quality of the results for this first test. The way colors come out, it's very film-like, very analog-like. It's interesting because it's something I've read about, I've heard about, and now that I'm testing it, I feel it's the case. So, but that'll be a different video where I talk about that. Here on the left, that's using the model before. It's also a Foveon sensor. It's a Sigma DP2X digicam, less than 4 megapixel resolution, but the color rendering is also great. Interesting camera too to use. So that was just a test I was doing, an experimental thing. And on the right, that we're going towards something completely different. That's using an old lens, a Hector 125mm f2.5 lens. It was meant for Visoflex, kind of reflex apparatus for Leica cameras. But this lens actually has the way it projects the image, it makes it compatible with medium format digital Leicas. So here I'm taking this picture with a Leica S007 medium format digital camera, and really interesting rendering, huge bokeh, really old school rendering, but very precise. So that's my first picture using this apparatus, kind of Frankenstein looking, but anyways. Here we're going back to something more traditional for me in terms of cameras. That's the Leica SL2, modern camera. And I'm testing a lens which is kind of cheap, but supposed to have interesting results. It's an Asthori 50mm f2.0. It's a very inexpensive lens. It's supposed to have an optical construction which is kind of a classic old school like. Totally manual, and I wanted to test it because it's really, really affordable. And these are my two first tests, and I really like the rendering actually. It hasn't got so much character, but it's quite precise, nice to use. The construction is good. Here again, two pictures with it. Good, quite precise, yeah, and good geometry. On the left, that's a plate, but on the right, that's the Geneva Bay in Switzerland, and during a gray, cloudy day, works pretty well. I'll do a separate video about this lens once I get more experience with it. Here I'm going back to a previous shoot from the months before. Sometimes I don't digitize the prints, and that's the case with this Polaroid Go. I hadn't scanned it, so now I've scanned it. That's why it's here, and that was for the Hyprt8 project. And this Polaroid Go format is quite small. It's quite recent, and you do get those weird artifacts from the chemistry when it's not very well dispersed on the film substrate, but it gives just really interesting rendering. Going back to Foveon sensors, here is a continuation of my tests of the DP2 Merrill camera. I like going around, walking around, discovering different suburbs or cities or places. And that's One, it's One city, one of the suburbs of the central Geneva. And yeah, here we really see this kind of interesting color science from this sensor and from Sigma. Here again, two pictures. Very organic. In some ways, the color balance looks a little bit like what we had with the expired Vision 3 film. Interesting. And I kind of really like the rendering. It's not very... I do understand now why some people think it's kind of crap and some people think it's really fantastic. It's kind of very characterial. I don't know how to say it in English, but it's got lots of character, and I personally kind of like it. It's nice, very, very soft and analog. Soft is maybe not the good term. Here, two other pictures again. It's kind of very precise, but the rendering is definitely different from usual sensors. And here again, with those two pictures, a good idea of the rendering. Even so, even more because this is not a low quality video, but obviously we're in HD and the pictures are in way higher resolution. But you do feel this kind of organic rendering in terms of color. So very interesting, those Foveon sensors. I will definitely follow up on it. Going to something completely different, that's using the Minox classic Leica M3, kind of a toy camera from the early 2000s. It's supposed to be 5 megapixel, but it's interpolated and the sensor is kind of bad at low lights, but it does give you this interesting grain, very digital-like grain, and a very interesting lens too. It's not precise. Everything's kind of lo-fi, but there's definitely some character. And yeah, I was here again, two pictures. I'm trying to work with it once in a while. I'm actually attracted to this camera. I like having it around and taking those weird pictures. It's got something to it. So I'll be doing a separate video about this tiny camera. But in the meantime, these are some pictures I've taken with. Here we're going back to film in Belgrade. That's using the Contax T camera again and using the Foma Retropan 320 ISO film. Some scenes from, on the left, that's the new Belgrade. On the right, that's near the castle in Belgrade. A few shots I took simply roaming around. Here, the picture on the left, that's central Belgrade, the old town. I really like the rendering of this camera, and the handling is really nice. So I still need a bit more experience with the Contax T, but it's a classic, and I'll be doing a little more before doing any video about it. On the right, that's going back to this Hector 125mm f2.5 lens, adapted to the medium format S007. I wanted to test it a little bit more, so went on a photo walk with a friend and photographer colleague, and just went to test it out. And really interesting rendering here again. You do get this incredible depth of field and this really soft bokeh. Old school rendering, definitely, but using the medium format sensor, it's kind of something else. Really enjoyed working with this apparatus. I'm looking forward to test it a little bit more. I'll be also using this lens on a full frame sensor to see how it renders. But using medium format is great. And here again, two pictures with the same apparatus. As you can see, the bokeh is just phenomenal. The depth of field comes out great. This kind of interesting rendering that definitely looks like an old lens, but very precise, very nice color restitution, and yeah, these photos were just going around the city of Geneva. But yeah, hopefully this episode was interesting for you. I hope you were entertained, and if you have, as usual, if you have questions or regarding the equipment or how I did the pictures or whatever, some reactions, don't hesitate. And yeah, catch you next time.